the heart of this nation, under skies so blue,
there's a spirit that's stirring, values strong and true.
From the mountains to the prairies, from the cities to the sea, we stand for liberty, for faith and family. We're diving deep into the heart of what we believe.
You know, after big elections, it's pretty common, isn't it? You hear these predictions that, oh, this party is just done for.
Right, or there's been some permanent realignment. That word gets thrown around a lot.
Exactly. But what if history tells a slightly different story? What if some prominent voices are actually warning about something? Well, unexpected, right around the corner. Today we're taking a deep dive into a recent piece from The New American. It features a pretty strong warning from commentator Glenn Beck and history professor Victor Davis Hanson. They've laid out this detailed case for how America elects a socialist president in 2028.
Yeah, and what's really compelling, I think, is how they weave together historical patterns with what's happening right now, socially and politically. That's how they build their argument. So our mission here in this deep dive is really to unpack their specific concerns, to look at the why behind this prediction.
Okay.
We'll explore the factors they see enabling a potential shift. Things like, how parties evolve, broader societal trends, and also how movements that seem kind of niche maybe gain real traction.
All right, let's get into this then, because look, this isn't just about one election cycle, is it? It's about understanding these kind of underlying forces and the perspectives shaping our whole democratic process. We're going to pull out the key insights, maybe some surprising facts, and the specific details from their analysis, just so you can grasp the full scope of what they're warning about and, what it might suggest for the future. So Beck and Hanson, they kind of kick things off by tackling that very idea head on. The whole party is done for narrative. They basically say, look, we've seen this movie before many times, and the ending, always the same. The party bounces back.
Right. They bring up Nixon's huge wins, 68 and 72, landslides. And afterwards, people were saying the Democrats, their coalition was just too fractured. It meant collapse.
But then what happened?
They won the very next presidential election, 1976.
Exactly. And it didn't stop there, did it?
No, not at all. Think about Reagan, 2 massive wins, 80 and 84. Again, you heard widespread predictions. The Democratic Party, terminal decline, especially with the rise of the so-called Reagan Democrats.
Yeah, I remember that talk.
Yet just 4 years after Reagan leaves office, Bill Clinton wins, a Democrat, 2 terms. And we started seeing what was then called political correctness becoming more prominent.
And they mentioned similar predictions after, the 2010 midterms.
Yep, and after Trump's win in 2016, too. But the pattern just repeated. So Beck and Hanson's point is this history suggests a real persistent resilience in the Democratic Party.
Okay, so the core idea is, despite maybe current talk of Democratic decline, history suggests, well, be careful about that assumption. And this is where their warning gets really specific. They believe the Democratic Party is actually undergoing a deliberate rebranding towards socialism.
Not just sort of drifting accidentally in their view.
Right. They trace this back, starting really with Bernie Sanders' 2016 campaign, and then amplified significantly by the rise of Representative Sandy Cortez.
And another really interesting piece of their argument focuses on Zohran Mamdani, his recent win in the New York City Democratic primary for mayor. He's an openly socialist candidate.
Right.
And Beck and Hanson see his win significantly, backed by establishment figures like Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries. They see that as a clear signal, a signal that socialist candidates are gaining mainstream acceptance within the party structure.
So not just a local NYC thing in their analysis.
Exactly. They argue it points to bigger trends, like the Democratic Socialists of America, the DSA. They say it's become this really powerful organizing force.
And they mention membership numbers.
Yeah, quite starkly. They note it exploded from around 7,000 members back in 2016 to over 55,000 today. And that provides, operatives funding support for candidates like Mamdani and Cortez.
And they go further, don't they? They claim Cortez is actively being sort of groomed.
As the new face for this movement.
They highlight her fighting oligarchy tour with Bernie Sanders, describing those events as essentially socialist pep rallies. Passing the torch, from Sanders to Cortez, positioning her potentially.
Future presidential run, yeah.
They even mentioned Mamdani appearing alongside Cortez since 2023.
Right.
They see it all as part of an effort to normalize socialism.
So, okay, that naturally leads to the question, why might voters be open to this kind of message, what makes them susceptible, according to Beck and Hanson, they point to several societal factors.
Like what?
Well, they argue that younger voters may be facing unemployment, debt. They're particularly vulnerable, having been, and this is their phrasing, marinated in Marxist university teachings.
Okay.
There's also the issue they raise about poor history and civics education. They note only 13% of 8th graders are proficient in U.S. history.
13%. Wow.
Yeah, which in their view makes voters more susceptible to socialist narratives because they lack that historical context.
That is a stark figure. And does it connect to other things they mention?
It does. They link it to what they describe as an increasing tolerance, even approval sometimes, of things like riots or political violence.
Okay, tolerance of violence. That sounds serious.
It does, and they point to a really alarming statistic from their research. They say 49% of youth reportedly condoning a CEO's murder.
Wait, 49%? Condoning murder.
That's the statistic they cite, yes. They claim this shows a kind of shift that emboldens radicals and weakens moderate Democrats.
How exactly do they connect that specific, shocking statistic to a potential socialist shift? Do they elaborate?
They seem to view it as part of a larger cultural change, one that normalizes more extreme viewpoints, diminishes traditional American values, which in turn makes the electorate potentially more open to really radical change.
Okay.
They also bring up declining national pride, citing figures like only 36% of Democrats expressing pride in America, and the influence of ranked choice voting. That's another factor they highlight.
Ranked choice voting, how does that play in, according to them?
Their argument is that with RCV, highly motivated, very organized blocs like socialist activists, for instance, can have an outsized influence. They can consolidate votes behind their candidates, even if those candidates don't get a simple majority initially.
Right, okay. So moving on to how these candidates might actually win, Hanson specifically warns against underestimating them, doesn't he?
He does. He draws these parallels to historical moments where figures seen as radical gained power democratically. Like Germany electing Nazis or Mussolini's shift from socialism to fascism in Italy. He emphasizes that figures like Hitler and Mussolini, they were initially dismissed by many as, nuts or crazy.
Right.
But he reminds us they were also very skilled, often photogenic, and definitely charismatic.
Charisma.
And building right on that point, both Beck and Hanson assert that in politics, well, charisma is king.
That's a direct quote.
Yes. They point out that for decades now, the more charismatic major party U.S. presidential candidate has won every single time.
Every time. Huh?
And they argue that while, you as an informed listener might carefully weigh policy details, most voters, they contend, make decisions based mainly on emotion, not spreadsheets and platforms.
So like gut feeling over policy points.
Essentially. They suggest imagining someone like a kindly, maybe apolitical grandmother watching TV. She might just see someone who speaks well, looks good, shows passion, makes pronouncements with authority. And she could be swayed by that feeling, regardless of the actual policy.
Yeah, that's a tough pill to swallow for those of us who like digging into the details, isn't it?
It is.
But they really hammer home this idea of emotional connection. And they'll back it up with examples too, right? Like Cortez.
Right. They cite her unexpected upset win over a longtime Democratic incumbent in her first House race back in 2018, noting she was apparently chosen from among 10,000 contenders by a socialist group.
10,000. Wow.
And similarly, Mamdani in New York, who they say was polling at just 1% 6 months before the primary, he destroyed the frontrunner, in their words.
So they see them as skilled communicators.
They describe them as smooth as silk demagogues who can talk chicken off the bone. Skilled at fooling people is the phrase they use.
Okay. And there's another big piece to their analysis, isn't there? Something about institutional power.
Yes, what Hanson calls the left's great institutional power.
And where do they see this power residing?
He lists quite a few areas: mainstream media, universities, K-12 education, major foundations, pop culture, even most corporate boardrooms, Wall Street, professional sports.
That's quite a list.
Yeah. He concludes they have a lot of ways of exercising influence, ways that the right, in his view, often doesn't fully see or counter effectively.
So that institutional leverage, combined with this focus on charisma and emotion, that forms the core of their pathway to 2028.
That seems to be the crux of it, yes.
Okay. So we've just taken this deep dive into Beck and Hanson's pretty comprehensive warning about the 2028 election. We've walked through their argument about that historical pattern, Democratic Party resilience, how they believe the party's undergoing this deliberate rebranding towards socialism. Amplified, they say, by figures like Bernie Sanders, Representative Sandy Cortez, and now Zohran Mamdani in New York.
Right, and also that significant growth of the Democratic Socialists of America jumping from 7,000 members in 2016 to over 55,000 today. And if we connect that back to the bigger picture, their analysis really highlights this confluence of societal factors they believe are making voters more susceptible, perhaps, to socialist rhetoric.
Like the education stats.
Exactly. Poor history and civics education, that 13% proficiency figure for 8th graders in U.S. history, but also things like declining national pride, the potential influence of ranked choice voting.
And the charisma factor.
Definitely. What's particularly striking is their caution. Don't underestimate charismatic figures, drawing those parallels to historical moments where radicals gained power, emphasizing that charisma is king in politics.
Because voters often decide based on emotion, not just policy.
That's their argument.
And adding right on to that, Beck and Hanson point to what they call the left's significant institutional power across media, universities, culture, corporations, giving them, in their view, many avenues to exert influence.
Yeah. And while they do explicitly state there's no guarantee a socialist will win in 2028, they certainly lay out a very specific pathway, a potential scenario for how it could happen.
Drawing that line from historical patterns right through to current trends.
Which really raises a big question, doesn't it? In this world of constantly shifting political landscapes, tons of information flying around, how do you discern the true nature of these movements or the real motivations behind voting decisions? Their whole discussion kind of brings us back to that famous observation by the philosopher Joseph de Maistre. People get the government they deserve.
Wow. People get the government they deserve.
Yeah. It's a powerful thought. Maybe it's something to consider as you reflect on the insights from this deep dive and just continue to watch the political shifts happening around us.
You Democrats, bloated bureaucrats, like a New York sewer rat.